Okay, hi. We're going to get ready to do our live critique. Just going to take my watch off because while we wait for a few people to join us, because the magnet in my band affects my my laptop here. All right. So we got anyone watching yet? Garrett, we got anyone on? If you are on, let us know where you are and if you can hear me loud and clear. Good morning, hi. We have 20 images to get through in this image critique. So firstly, I just want to say thank you to our 20 members of the group who submitted a photo. It's not easy to put your photos out there in front of everybody to be critiqued, especially live on Facebook. So good job doing that. The best thing about critiques is that it's all about growth, it's all about learning, and if you're not looking for critique, then that's fine, but it's always great to take on a little bit of advice, but also just to see your image or images through someone else's eyes, because I know that with my own work, I can be looking at a photo for a really long time and I miss things, and it's not until somebody else points it out you go, oh yes, now I see it. So I've got my 20 photos here opened in Photoshop, and what I'm going to do is go through each one and talk a little bit about composition, talk about lighting, talk about posing, and all of those things, retouching, just to sort of give, I suppose, some of my years of knowledge and experience to hopefully help you move forward with your photography. So yeah. Oh, I love it when Facebook auto corrects my name to Jelly. Good morning. Now, when I've got a TV here behind the camera. I can see your comments, but I can't actually see your name. So I don't know who's actually making all of those comments. But yes, hi everyone. Garrett's also here. So if there's anything that any questions or anything like that, he can read them out and I can answer them as we go. So yeah, but everyone can obviously hear me loud and clear. So we'll get going. Friday morning, last day of the week, and we've got our first image.
Here we go.
All right. Okay, so gosh, the connection in this is just really lovely, and the dad's hands are delicately placed and that little baby is looking up into his eyes. I love that part of it. The one thing that really jumped out at me when I first saw this image, hang on, let me check yep, it's all good, my pen, are these lines in the background. They're really distracting. I think this is such a beautiful, intimate moment between a father and his child, and there's a lot of busyness going on behind the scene. So you could, you could reduce that by darkening some of the brighter areas and then fading some of the lines, but that's obviously entirely up to you, and that's just my feedback. There are a couple of bright parts to this image as well, because I do love the dark, moody nature of it. But if we zoom out, now when you start to zoom back into the image, the first thing that you see are Dad's hands, the back of Dad's hands, and that's just where the light is hitting them. So obviously they're closest to the light source, so they're going to be brighter. You can tone those down, but what I like to do with shots like this is just slightly turn them on an angle towards that light, so that more light will come in and hit the baby's face. So that means just for this, because I can see the direction of the light is coming in from here. Excuse me, just one moment. Sorry about that. What I would do is just turn them, the dad's hands towards that backdrop, and then that way the light would come in more to bring more detail out into the baby, and then that would draw your eye further into that connection. But yeah, and another thing, with dads holding the baby like this, I try to position the baby up a little higher on the chest so you can see that the bum is quite low down here. I would try and position the bottom up really, really high, and have those arms up higher so Dad doesn't have to lean down so much, because what you're sort of getting here is, quite a lot of skin area there, which again is brighter than both of their faces. And then you've got a little bit of a double chin as well. So I know most people don't like to see themselves with a double chin, so few little tips like that for next time that you try this. But yeah, loving the color tones through this. I love those really sort of dark, warm tones, and yeah, it is a beautiful sort of touching moment between Dad and his baby. And you know, there's only a few sort of little things that I would change there. All right, let's move on to the next image. I'm gonna draw all over all of these images in Photoshop, and then I'm just gonna close them without saving them. So if you haven't been with us before for a critique, and if you can't stay with us for the whole critique, the video is recorded and it's going to stay in the group, so you can come back and watch it later, because you know it's 20 images for me to get through. I do try to do it as quickly as possible, but for those of you that know me, know I like to talk. All right, the colors in this are just beautiful. Excuse me, I don't know what's wrong with me this morning, Garrett. I am. And I'm loving the posing. The placement of the hands is really soft, it's really delicate. The baby looks really comfortable. Just a couple of little things. There's a little bit of inconsistency in terms of the skin tones. Down here in the feet and the legs, they're a little cooler than say up here and around in the face. And one other thing to look out for is just these highlights here. I'm gonna bring up my histogram. So this is something that I've always got visible whenever I'm editing, and also when I'm taking my shot, I've always got the histogram there as well. But as the baby's head is closest to the light source and you've got this white headband on, it can be very hard to not overexpose those white details when you are exposing for the skin tones. So you just want to be a little bit more careful in terms of the detail there in the highlight. You can see the information is just hitting the end of the graph here, so a little bit of loss just in some of those tiny little highlights there, so you do have to be careful of that, because it is quite a big headband. So when you overexpose things like that, they can become quite distracting. The other thing that I'm looking at here is just the top of the baby's head. If we have a little look here at the size of the baby's head in comparison to the size of the face, the top of the baby's head seems to be more prominent, more dominant. So just in terms of the positioning of the baby, trying to bring that chin up a little more and shooting sort of down the nose a little more. But yeah, obviously babies' heads are the largest part of their body, so it is a little bit hard to avoid. But a little bit of liquify as well can also bring down and reduce the size of the top of the baby's head. And with headbands like this, possibly bringing them up a little higher so it sort of sits up a little bit more onto the top of the baby's head could then give you the illusion that the face is obviously larger, so you can break up that large area above it as well. But yeah, I do love the pose. The blanket is beautiful and smooth. Just be careful when you are blurring the edges there, that if we zoom down here, that you're not losing all of that detail. You can see how it goes from no sort of textural detail into the very small amount of texture that is in that blanket. So yeah, maybe just reduce that blur a little more. What happens when you do blur a lot like that in the background is you start to sort of lose a lot of the quality of the information there, and then when you've got that graduation of tone through the background, you're going to start to create some banding. So try not to remove all of the texture and detail, and leave a little bit in there. But yeah, otherwise really lovely. Okay, all right. The wrapping here and the posing of the little face on top of the hand is done beautifully. The one thing that I'm noticing straight away is just that it's a little underexposed. So the image seems quite dark. Excuse me just a moment.
While you have a drink there, we've got lots of people joining us.
Oh,
We've
fantastic.
We've got Sanel from South Africa, Macy from the UK, so a few people staying up late.
Yeah, hi, thanks for joining me, guys. I do love
Italy.
doing these. Oh wow, hi. Sleep deprivation. Well, I had to get up at 6 o'clock to be here this morning, so I'm feeling you. Okay, let's keep going. All right, the color tones as well throughout this are really, really lovely. Just bring that exposure up just a tad. So what I'm going to do is just bring up that histogram there. You can see some of the information over here is just sort of getting quite close to that end there, and this is going to be over here in the bonnet. So it is very hard, obviously, like I said, to control the highlights there. When you are exposing for skin and things like that, you can sort of tend to overexpose them. But I can see that the direction of the light here is coming in from the left-hand side. What might benefit a setup like this is just having a reflector over here. You still want to keep those beautiful shadows, but just filling some of those shadows with a little bit of light, bouncing that back in. It's going to help lift that exposure as well. All right. Now, when I sort of talk about exposure, I'm kind of looking down here into these sort of darker tones, and you can see there, just by bringing those up a little bit, the difference in the overall exposure of that image, but you do want to be careful of those highlights. All right. Also, with a crop like this, you've just cropped out the bottom of the baby there. If you were going to crop through the baby, I would possibly try to do that at both at the top and the bottom, and then that way it's going to be a little more balanced. So I would probably look at a crop like that is a little bit more tighter. But yeah, otherwise really lovely. Just be careful of that exposure and a few of those little highlights. But it could just be a matter of the intensity of that light, and then just bringing a little bit more in to fill some of those shadows so that they're not so muddy. But yeah, I love that wrap. Oh God, look at that face. Let me get rid of the crop tool. Oh, the posing here is lovely. That baby looks really comfortable. The hands are soft and delicate. I would just be really careful again with a crop like this coming through the wrap, because there seems to be quite a bit of detail here. So giving the baby a little bit more space down in front here, that's one thing that I would definitely recommend. And probably you can see where the photographer is standing sort of here, and the camera angle is coming sort of from that direction, and possibly move yourself around more to the left and come in from this angle. Obviously always shooting down on the baby, never up the nose, so you're seeing those nostrils. I always imagine that there is a so if you were going to take a photo of me, if you all had a camera in your hand right now, this is not going to be very flattering, but you know, if I'm back like this and you take a photo, that's going to be shooting straight up my nose. So I always try to imagine that there's a line from the lens to the top of the nose, a straight line from my camera, and then that way I'm going to get that face square on to the camera. So just coming up a little bit, moving around to the left and leaving a little bit more space there around the baby. That's also going to eliminate a lot of this, because as you move around to the left, you won't see as much of this detail that's going on down here, because it kind of looks a little messy and untidy in terms of the shadows that are coming in around the fabric, as opposed to the background up here and down here where it's all really smooth and clean and neat. So yeah, I would possibly, let's get rid of some of those lines, either adjust your crop and bringing it in a little tighter to remove some of that, or allowing more space and then just sort of reducing a lot of that mess there, just because it's taking my eye away from that baby's face. But that's a very, very minimal change. The colour tone is very soft and very muted, so just be careful when you are removing a lot of those sort of skin reds, that you're not making it look dull and flat. You do want to add a little bit of life back into it, so maybe warming up some of those skin tones around the hands and the feet there, just so it's all quite even. Now there are a couple of little hot spots in terms of where the light is coming in and hitting the back of the hand here, and just in and around this area of the face. Even though the light is you know, falling across the baby beautifully there, some of those little highlights can be quite distracting as well. And you can see that the exposure over here in the histogram is quite bright, so maybe just bringing back that exposure in camera possibly, and that'll allow you some more shadows and things like that down around the baby. But yeah, it is just, I love the colour tones throughout the wrap and the blanket. They're really, really lovely. And the smile on the baby's face is just so sweet. So good job. All right. Oh, all these smiling babies. This is again another beautifully captured moment in terms of that smile, because we all know how hard it can be to get a smiling baby, and that perfect moment. And you know, I'm really loving the styling in terms of the colours, that you've got those darker tones, things like that. What would have benefited this image is if the dad had been on the other side. So that way he could have been in his not little face, but his face could have been over here and looking down towards his baby. I often find when you've got a dad over here, when they're looking down, they're looking at the top of the baby's head. He can't see that baby's face or that smile. He's got a smile on his face, and the three of them, you know, all look like they're having this beautiful intimate moment, but the connection is somewhat lost here with the dad. And because he is on this side where the light's coming in, the light is hitting his arm here, and it's hitting the top of his head here and his nose. So when you've got a really kind of dark, moody image here, and you're going for that look, you need to be really careful of the intensity of that light, but also the placement of your subjects. Now, he's not wearing a long sleeve shirt, so he's got this dark shirt on, and then he's got bare arms. So you need to be careful when the light does hit those areas that it doesn't overexpose them. What I also would have done here is that they look quite square on to the background. I would have just turned them more on a slight angle towards that light source. So that way more light would come in and fill some of those shadows, but also light that baby's face, because it is somewhat darker than both mum and dad's faces. You can see the highlights here in mum's face and up on the top of her forehead, and I'm drawing all over this image, I'm so sorry. But a lot of those highlights are quite bright in comparison, and you can see here also that there's quite a bright highlight on the hand and on the hand down here. So just turning them towards that light source, bringing dad on the other side to create that connection will also eliminate these bright shadows over here. I mean, I can see that mum's got, you know, somewhat of a longer sleeve on here and hair to cover that shoulder if there is some light coming in. But yeah, I do love that beautiful intimate moment. Also, just coming up a little higher there. In terms of your camera angle, you'll be coming down onto their faces, so maybe standing on a little bit of a step, so you're just that little bit higher, and that way you're not shooting so square on to make these parts of their bodies appear larger as well. Because if you have a look at the size of their hands here, they're quite large in comparison to the size of their faces. So when you come up a little higher and you bring their faces closer to the camera, the rest of the body parts, the rest of everything else will appear somewhat smaller as it moves further away from the lens. Also, lens selection here is quite important. So if you are shooting with a wide angle, and you know, I understand that some people's studio spaces are quite small, so you are restricted with being able to move further back with a longer focal length. But yeah, a lot of those things just to keep in mind. What also would benefit this image is as a reflector, just bouncing some light back in over here. You want to keep that really dark, moody look, but a little bit of light bounce back in will just fill some of these dark shadows that you've got going on down here. Because if you have a look at that histogram, we've got a lot of information over here hitting the edge there, which means you're going to have a loss of detail in some of those dark blacks. Which means when you're printing all of this area here, there won't be any detail in the hair and in some of those shadows. So yeah, you just need to be a little bit careful with that. And when you are using reflectors, every surface is reflective. We use large polystyrene sheets that cost, I had them cut to fit my windows so I can block light out, but I think they cost like $30 Australian. So they're very inexpensive, and you can have them cut to any size, and they're lightweight, so you can lean them up against anything as well. All right.
Oh, lots of people joining us this morning.
Oh, fantastic.
So we're up to about 100 people watching live. It's great.
Oh, fantastic. Hi, everyone. Thank you. Obviously, these are all my opinions and, you know, tips and tricks that I've learned over the last 15 years in photography. So, you know, if you can take any of this on board, even if you haven't submitted a photo, it's always great to have a look just to see what other people see. So, yeah, I appreciate this. Alrighty. Oh, the colours here in terms of the bonnet and the background, flow really well. You can kind of see that the baby is the main part of this image, and I've been saying this over again in a lot of my critiques. When we're looking at using different tones and contrasting colors, we really want to try and make the baby the centerpiece, and I think that the photographer's done a great job here. One thing that I would probably look at is that camera angle. We can see that this half of the baby is somewhat closer to the lens, so you're coming in and shooting from this direction. You want to bring your body just around a little bit more towards the head and shoot from that direction, and then that way you're going to eliminate a lot of what you can see down here in terms of the shadows and just the positioning of the baby's feet and the bottom. Excuse me just a minute. I'm sorry. I don't know what's wrong with me today. I'm not sick.
As soon as we went live, it just appeared. You were fine before we pushed the live button.
I haven't done a lot of talking, obviously, this morning. Alrighty. Also, the light coming in here onto the face and the body is quite bright, and we've got like a dark vignette around the outside, so it can be a little contrasty there, and it can sort of look a little heavy in the corners, so maybe just softening that down. Vignettes do help you draw your eye into the subject, but when it's this contrasty, just soften it down a little bit. When it comes to straightening up that camera angle as well, as the baby is on an angle here, what you want to do is just rotate your camera when you're taking the image, so rotating to the right or rotating to the left, whichever it may be when you're shooting for whatever pose, angle, and just try and sort of even that baby out so it doesn't look like it's kind of coming down on a slope off the page. What I always try to look for is balance in an image. So if we bring up our our rule of thirds, what you always want to try and do is kind of have the baby placed evenly within your rule of thirds. So with this particular pose, I always try to keep the baby in the bottom 2/3 of my image, so sort of keeping them down here like this, and then having more in the background, more space in the background. But yeah, other than that, the pose is great. Just here with this back leg, you can see how that foot is coming through there. What I try to do is get my hand up underneath the sort of the shins of both legs, and I just kind of pull their little knees apart so that they're evenly separated underneath their body to where the feet will sort of sit flat on top of one another, because that little foot kind of poking through there, it looks like it doesn't belong to anything and it's kind of just sticking out. So just tucking that leg up a little further and separating those knees underneath the baby will really help with the positioning of the feet. But you've done a great job getting the connection between the knee and the elbow there. You can also see there's something, I'm not quite sure what it is, but the length of the leg here looks quite a bit sort of shorter, I suppose, to the arm. So yeah, just a little bit more on that positioning. It's I'm not quite sure what it is there, but yeah, just separating those knees and getting those feet sort of sitting a little flatter underneath and coming around further to the right and to turning that camera angle. But great job there. Oh, that headband is just adorable. All right, so I love how the headband and the outfit are sort of, go really well here, but I don't understand why the blanket is white. So what I would have gone for is possibly, a grey or a light sort of blue backdrop to kind of make this gel a little better together in terms of coordinating and styling this, because the white blanket is just, it doesn't match the outfit, and it's also really bright in comparison to the subject. So you can see where the light is coming in and it's hitting the blanket right here, and that's because obviously it's the brightest part of the image. But you can also see where the supports are underneath the baby, it's created somewhat of like a mountain. So with the light coming in, it's going to hit that before anything else. So what you want to do is direct your light so it comes down on an angle, not straight in. So when this is your light, if it's coming in like this, it's going to light the side of everything that is in front of it. If you have your light, and I can't assume what type of light source that you've used here, but if you've got your light positioned a little higher on an angle coming down towards that baby, you're going to be able to direct and control it a lot better in terms of bringing more light in onto the baby's face. So, because it doesn't seem to have a lot of that light, and it's a lot darker than obviously this brighter part. But also, if you'd used a darker blanket in terms of a grey or a blue, and I know that we all, we don't all have every colour blanket in the back, in the rainbow. What you want to try and do is a colour change if you can in post-production. So, but yeah, just directing that light a little better. Also, if you'd turned the baby, if it's on a posing bag, you can turn it towards the light if it's natural light, or just bring that light in around a little further in front, so that it's not coming in from the side, and that it's coming in more around in front of the baby and then down across, so it falls a little more evenly across the baby's face like that. Yeah, but that's about it. The pose is lovely. Just obviously being careful of where we are placing the supports and the shadows. A little bit of a reflector, a bounce light will come in and sort of remove some of those heavier, darker shadows. But you still do want to have some shadows to keep those little features highlighted. But yeah, in terms of the posing, lovely. The baby looks very comfortable, very, very relaxed. Just a few little things there in terms of the direction of light and using the styling. What I'm going to comment on very, very quickly here is the positioning of the baby. There is a lot of space around the baby. If you bring that crop in just a little bit, now the baby is a little bit more dominant, and you can see that I've brought the baby's face over onto this side of the image in terms of my rule of thirds, and then the direction of that face is leading you into that negative space, so it's balanced out a little bit more, and then that way you're removing a lot of that it's sort of nothing, that space around the baby, because it's so white and there's no detail there. You're now drawing your eye in towards the subject, so a little bit of a different crop there. But yeah, I love the pose, and this headband's adorable. Alrighty. Oh. This this face is just gorgeous, that bottom lip. I'm loving the way that the light is coming across and highlighting the baby's little face there and that bottom lip. And the placement of the teddy bear, that's all lovely. The baby looks really comfortable. The one thing that I'm kind of looking at here when I first open the image up is this space over here. It just seems to be a lot of kind of area that's not necessary to the image. So possibly a different crop, or reducing the amount of light that is going to hit that area. So what you could do, if this is natural light coming in, and you've got floor to ceiling windows, I would just bring in something along the bottom of the window to block out the light that's hitting the floor there. That way the light's purely going to come in and hit the baby, and it's not going to hit the floor as it comes through the window, and to highlight that, little darken that area down, and when you're backlighting a subject like this. Also with the wrap, as it's kind of coming down and it is quite bright there, it's leading my eye just out of the screen. So either sort of positioning it up a little more and tucking it in around the baby here, or cropping again in camera when you're taking the shot just a little tighter. So if we have a look at our crop, what you can do is crop it out and come in and make that more about the baby. So that's kind of where I would have sort of sat in terms of camera angle there, and cropping in a little tighter and reducing a lot of what's going on around the baby, so therefore the baby then becomes the main focus there. In Liquify, I would have just kind of tucked in a few of these bumpy areas just to smooth those out as they are brighter, so they're not as distracting. And again, if we have a little bit of a look here, if you'd come down just slightly with your camera angle, so not so high looking down, but just lowered yourself just a little bit and then rotated that camera to your right to bring that baby's head up, you would have eliminated a lot of the top of the baby's head. So as you can see, you know, it's quite a large area in comparison to the little face. So just bringing your body down lower so that you're more square onto the face instead of coming down higher, so that you're not seeing as much of the top of the baby's head. But yeah, the pose is really lovely. The baby looks comfortable. You can darken this area down in post if you want to, but coming in a little closer and reducing a lot of the distraction around the edge of the frame will definitely bring that baby sort of more to the forefront of the image. But yeah, the red tones in the feet, just reducing some of those as well, and being careful in those darker red areas when you do reduce those red tones, that it's not going to start to look grey and sort of dull. You want to keep those even skin tones throughout the baby, and the skin in the baby's face is just beautiful. All right. I hope everybody's enjoying this.
Yes, lots of people saying how much they're getting out of it.
Oh, fantastic.
I remember from the years of going to judging with you and sitting in the back of the room and listening to, like, I'm not even a photographer, but just hearing what people have to say about different images, the learnings that you get from it.
Oh,
It's
absolutely.
so great.
And one thing that I really hope people take out of this is that if you think about when you pick up that camera to take a photo of a baby, you know, we have so much to consider. Our attention is on the safety and the well-being of the baby and the comfort of it. We're also looking at our camera angle, we're looking at our exposure, we're looking at our focus, making sure we get all of that right. We're also looking at the direction of the light. We have to take into consideration so many things in that split second that we take that photo that sometimes we miss it. So when you when you are sitting and listening to critiques, this also helps you, because in the back of your mind, when you go to pick up that camera next time, you'll be thinking, right, if I just turn my camera to the right a little more, if I just position the baby here, or if I just move my body around a little more, or if I come in a little tighter and I crop it in camera, I don't have to crop it in post-production. So that way it's always going to be in the back of your mind. I know for myself, when I've had my own images critiqued or judged in competitions, every time I go back to take that photo, I'm listening in the back of my mind to the words that the judges said. And it's what's pushed me, and it's what's made me a better photographer over the last 15 years. So they are so incredibly valuable in terms of you know, that growth and how far you want to take your photography. All right, next image. We don't see many portrait captures, as in orientation, so this is great. What I'm looking at here is the baby is perfectly in the center of this frame. Let me have a little look here, which is great in terms of composition. One thing that I am kind of seeing is just that camera angle. We can see that the bottom half of the baby is closer to the camera. So if it's possible, and I know not everyone has the ability to do it, because they're not as tall as me, but if you can get over a little more above the baby, a little bit more square on, you will get a much better perspective in terms of that camera angle, and the baby's face will come up and will be closer to the camera as well. What else is going to benefit you in that instance is also just placing some more supports in underneath this part of the baby and lifting them up a little higher. So with the baby kind of sinking in like this, this is where the hand and the face have come down. So what you want to do is place some supports at the back here and bring them up a little bit, and that way you can get that hand up and underneath the chin, and the chin sitting on top of it, so that it's not you know, it's not sort of covering half of the cheek there, that side of the face. It is very sweet, and the baby looks very comfortable, and you've got this gorgeous kind of like circular motion, but as you come in towards that face where that hand is positioned, it's kind of on a very pointy diagonal, and because that hand is quite bright, it is very distracting, and it does look a little awkward, a little uncomfortable. But that's you know, just a little bit of advice there in terms of the posing and just positioning those supports to bring that part of the baby up a little higher so that it is better supported to be able to position that hand better. If we have a look over here at our histogram, a lot of the information in this file is very, very bright, and it's also overexposed, which means, there's not going to be a lot of detail here or here in these white areas. When you are positioning the baby here like this, you do have to be very considerate of the direction of that light. And we can see that it looks like there's a couple of different different light sources. I'm not going to make any assumptions, but you know, as I kind of look around the image, there seems to be light coming from 2 different directions. So we've got light falling onto the blanket kind of over here, and then we've got light coming in here. So just be careful when you are placing those lights. I always try to have the baby's head closest to the light source, when you are positioning the baby on a posing bag on their back, you know, I turn and rotate that posing bag towards the light source. Obviously I use natural light, but if you're using artificial light, stick with one main light and then use a reflector to bounce some more light in here, because what we've done with lighting this image is the intensity of it is too bright, and it's just overpowered all of the information here, which means that there's very little detail in a lot of the area. But you know, it's a great start, and there's some really, really good you know, elements of this image. You do have to be careful of that lighting. So when I'm looking here also at the retouching, just be careful of those red skin tones. You can see down into these areas, it is quite sort of red, and then there's you know, not a lot of information here on the leg because it's quite bright. And then you've got some sort of magenta-y tones as well coming in and around the edges of the baby. So just in terms of skin tones, you know, getting that exposure right in camera, and having a look at your white balance as well. And then when you are editing your photos, make sure that your monitors are calibrated so that what you're seeing is you know, basically what you're going to get in a print. And you're going to find a huge improvement in your work when you start to get it right, obviously in camera, in terms of that exposure and white balance. And then you've got a calibrated monitor so that you can see all of that. But the histogram is your key to getting that exposure absolutely perfect. When you're taking that photo, what I really want to encourage everyone to do is to have that information on the back of your screen, so that when you get the shot, you look down, you're not looking at the thumbnail to gauge whether or not you've got that shot right, because that little LCD screen is not going to give you a clear indication of your exposure. It's the histogram and understanding where all the information in that histogram lies. And I explain all of that in getting it right in camera, because it's very, very hard to fix these mistakes in Photoshop. You cannot bring information back once you've lost it in capture. So, all right, let's move on. Wow. This has got such a really cool design element. It's kind of one of those images that just grabs your attention straight away. The placement of the parents' arms and their tattoos, it's really beautiful. It's absolutely lovely. The one thing that could have been slightly improved here is just that intensity of the light. It is a very contrasting image, but it's so contrasty here on the baby, and the brightest parts are the arm and the body. So if we just adjusted the direction and the intensity of that light, and possibly turned that baby's face up a little more towards the ceiling, so we could see more of its face, or just lifted it ever so slightly so that it wasn't so small in comparison to the body, by lifting that baby's head up a little higher with supports. What that's going to do when you're shooting from above like this is bring it closer to the camera, because your camera angle is fantastic, but if you could just bring that head up a little higher next time, it's going to make the head appear you know, what's the word I'm looking for? Oh, it'll come to me later when I don't need that word. But anyway, it's going to bring that face up a little more, so the body won't appear to be as a lot bigger than what the actual head is in comparison to the body. So yeah, and then the light will hit the face, and then not so much down here. But if you've got a well in your beanbag, it doesn't have to be deep. You know, the body's going to fall into that well, and then you lift the head up, and then that light will come across and hit the baby's face, as not so much the body as well. But yeah, the composition, I'm really enjoying this. Like, there's this kind of does somewhat bother me, but at the same time I kind of like that negative space around them. I don't know if you did crop it in towards there, it just wouldn't have the same impact. So but yeah, that dark line, it's kind of very sort of sharp, whereas over here it's not. So that's probably the one other little thing that I could critique on. And then if we just zoom in, we can see that the treatment that has been used on this, or if it's just a lot of grain or noise added, but the exposure there is just a little off. So yeah, being really careful that we're not kind of adding a lot of this sort of gritty texture into the image that becomes distracting, if that makes sense. But yeah, that really caught my eye. I love that composition. All right. Okay, so I'm just having a little look here, and I'm turning my head to imagine if I had the camera in my hand. Garrett's kind of doing the same thing. He's mimicking me here behind the camera. You know, that baby's face is absolutely beautiful, and you've done a great job at looking for that light to come in across the baby's face there. One thing that's kind of what I'm wanting to do is rotate the image. I'm kind of wanting to rotate it counterclockwise. I'm not sure why, but it just feels to me that it would be a little bit more balanced as a landscape than it does as a portrait. And when I did this, instantly the baby's head is somewhat higher than the body. And what you've done is cropped through the body, so you could even take that crop a little tighter and come in and eliminate some of the what's going on around the baby there, and make that face just a little bit larger in the frame. The little flower here, I do love the touch of florals, especially with little girls, but it is closer to the light source, so it is quite bright, and it is quite dominating there. So the baby's face is competing for your attention. The headband there is lovely, and it matches this, but you know, sometimes I like to take a photograph with the headband and without the headband, because then it's not until I kind of sometimes, you know, sit down to cull my galleries after a shoot that I go, oh, I kind of prefer it without the headband. Sometimes less is more, and when we continually add a lot of different elements to an image, they often become distracting and the photograph becomes busy. So we want to reduce a lot of that and make that baby, again, the centerpiece of this image, and frame them. So you've got quite a few different things going on. You've got a basket in the background. Baskets are a great way to add a frame within a frame in terms of your composition to frame that baby. So you want to look at the way that you position the baby in the basket next time, in terms of how you can actually frame your subject so that it's more complementary than distracting, because with the handle kind of hitting the edge of the frame and then the sort of basket going out and then coming down here, it is somewhat it's adding more elements to the image that are necessary, if that makes sense. It's not helping to frame the baby at all. And then you've got some texture on the floor over here, so maybe next time, like, have a look. Is that too many things, too many different elements again going on? And when we look in here, we just want to make sure that we get that focus spot on that eye. And I mean, those little puffy eyes, absolutely adorable. But yeah, it's just a little soft in and around that baby's face. So when they are sunk quite deep in and there's a lot going on around, you do have to make sure that you get that focus spot on, but just adding a little bit more support underneath the baby's head. So if I was going to position a little bit more support here, I would kind of lift the baby somewhat from that shoulder, the back of the neck area, just up a little bit, so that as the light comes in, it is going to hit the baby's face, but not hit the higher element here, like the flower and the top of the baby's head. So as the babies come down into the basket, it's created those shadows down here, so that light is not even across the baby's face. Alrighty. Color tones and everything though, just lovely. Where are we up to? Oh, look at that beautiful smile. All right. So I am opening these images for the first time. I don't like to look at images for great lengths of time before I critique them or judge them, because I want to be able to have that initial reaction of when I open up, what is the first thing I see? So that's the one thing that you've got to train your eye to do, is when you open a photograph, you want to have a look at the first thing that grabs your attention. And for me, the first thing that grabbed my attention was the side of the belly. And then I'd come up to that face and that smile. But the first thing that grabbed my attention was the side of the belly there, because it is the brightest part of the image. So when I start to have a look around, I can see all the different elements that have been added to kind of style this in a way to make it very beautiful and very feminine and pretty. And I think you've done a great job there. The one thing that I probably would recommend when using a background like this that's got so much going on, it's quite a busy background, even though it's very it's very sort of soft and delicate in terms of the color palette and those pretty flowers, is that I would have a very plain floor. So you've got quite a sort of dark line coming across the back of the image, and then you've got some really dark lines going on around here. So I would probably use something that doesn't have any texture or detail, because you've got this really kind of rustic floor, and then you've got this really feminine, busy background. They just don't really gel together. So I would probably eliminate or soften some of the lines going on around the floor there, because if you have a look, her dress has a lot of lines. You've got a line here, 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 then you've got all of these lines going on. All of those lines are going to drag your eye away from this beautiful face. And that's kind of what I'm seeing here, just the amount of lines that are going on in what should be a very soft and delicate image. One thing I can suggest, and I know again, we not all of us have beautiful big studios, but if you are doing maternity, you do need a little bit more room when you're shooting indoors, because when they're so close to the background, it doesn't create a lot of separation between them and the background. So whenever I'm shooting a maternity, I probably want to have them about I'm so sorry, must be frustrating to listen to. I probably want to have about 1.5 to 2 meters at least with my subject from the background, and that's going to create some beautiful separation, and also it'll soften that background as well, so it's not so busy, but you'll still have those beautiful colors and tones going on in the background, but it will be a lot softer, and it'll bring her more into the foreground and create that beautiful depth of field that you want. The dress is absolutely stunning. Another thing that I'm kind of looking at here is that the light is coming directly in from the side there, and it's an elevated light. I can see that there's no light obviously coming down here onto the floor, which is great. Let me go back, remove a lot of those other lines. So the light is coming in, which is fantastic, but it's hitting the side of her body. So what I try to do with my all of my portraits when I'm lighting them is turn them on an angle towards that light source. And this is, in that way you're going to light her face and not just the side of her face. So if we have a look here, the shadows over here from her nose and everything are really quite sort of dark in comparison to the rest of her face. So turning them on an angle, you're still going to have some beautiful shadows that are going to highlight those features, but you're just going to have a more even spread of light fall across the face. And with that light coming in from the side, you can see how it is lighting. Like I said, that was the first thing I saw in the image when I opened it. It's lighting that side of the body, turning her towards that light source just a little bit is going to help add a little bit more light, so then you don't have these stronger shadows in the foreground directly front onto the camera. Yeah, maternity is, I love photographing maternity, and it is something, you know, when you are moving the body and shaping it, like she's posed beautifully, but she's not posed beautifully for the light. When you're posing them, you've got to pose them into the light or adjust that light for the pose. So if this is an artificial light, just bring it around a little more and have it come down across her face. So if I was the light, for example, this might visually make it a little easier. So the light is coming in here, and you can see that the shadows, obviously this room's got a lot of ambient light, but if you bring that light around on a bit more of an angle towards the face, that's the direction of light that I'm talking about. So if it is an artificial light, move it, or if it's natural light, adjust your model to suit. Okay. Oh, look at that face. Beautiful wrap. I can see here that the photographer has really taken the time to wrap that baby beautifully, and it looks like it's a little cocoon. It looks really comfortable in a beautiful sleep, and I can see the beautiful texture on the background there. So I'm really enjoying the composition here, because in terms of a black and white in that center, you know, this is really quite lovely. And you've spent a little bit of time. Baby's positioned in the center of the frame. What I often do when I am photographing the baby on the posing bag like this is that I try to bring them down into the bottom 2/3, and I'll try to lift that head so you can see the line there, and just give them that little bit more of a balance so that they're not so flat in the frame. So that's the one thing there, is just rotating that baby ever so slightly so that it's not so flat, and that head is not somewhat lower than the body. And yeah, the other thing that I'm probably going to suggest is just having that light. I can see where it's coming in. Again, it's coming in, you know, quite sort of flat there and side on. If you just rotated that baby a little more so that light was coming in from more of a front on angle, like I just mentioned with the maternity, you're going to then be able to fill some of the shadows here. So what's happening is the light's coming in, this part of the baby's body is higher than the face, so the light is going to hit it, and which is not a problem, but you want to light this part. This is the main part of the photograph. So you want to turn that baby, the posing bag, towards that light source a little more so that the light is not coming straight down. You can see the little shadow there under the nose. So you want to bring that light source around so it's not coming down here, it's coming in from a more elevated angle and across the baby's face. With black and whites, it is hard to get a really good, beautiful, contrasting black and white when you are editing them. So I can see that there's a lot of contrast between the background and between the baby, and adding a texture will obviously help in the background there if you're obviously adding it as an overlay layer or a soft light layer, because it's going to add contrast. But when you are editing the baby's face, you don't want to lose that contrast. You want it to continue so it's nice and consistent throughout the image. So what I would do is just here in my curves, for example, you've got your black information, your blacks, and then you've got your highlights over here, and you can see all that information. We have got a few highlights that are somewhat overexposed, so I'm going to be careful of those. When I do this to add contrast to an image, I hold the Alt key in on my keyboard, and you'll notice now as I move that white slider, it's gone black. It's showing me where I'm losing detail in those highlights. So now I can see that it is the information in the wrap that's lost some detail there. That's that information there. So I'm going to push those highlights, and I'm looking at the baby's face first and foremost. So I'm going to bring it back now so I'm not losing detail in the face. And then I'm going to bring my blacks in, and I'm having a look obviously at those shadows, and I usually go anywhere between 10 and 12. And then, Photoshop lesson here, add a layer mask, invert that, and then I will paint that on to the baby's face. So if we have a little look now, we're adding contrast to the baby's face. And what that's going to do is bring out those details, because in a black and white, you want blacks, you want whites, obviously not with a loss of detail. So you want to keep an eye on that histogram, but you also want grays. If it's just sort of a monotone gray, it's going to look quite sort of dull and flat. So you want to add some depth in terms of contrast there into the baby's face. Alrighty. Okay, I like this. I like the awkwardness of it actually, because that baby is just adorable. And you know, you don't see a lot of really simple images like this. You don't see a lot anymore. We used to do a lot of really naked babies, and you know, I think the trends now have somewhat changed, and we don't see completely naked babies as often as what we used to. What I'm kind of noticing here is that there is so much space going on around the baby that's kind of like it's a little overwhelming when you first kind of see it, because there's not a lot of information in that space either. So the baby is somewhat in the center of the frame, and there's a lot of information here in the foreground which you don't need. So what I would potentially do in camera is come in a little closer and just crop the photo in to eliminate some of that space, and now you've got a more evenly balanced photograph, and you're using the rule of thirds to sort of place the baby in that frame. And again, I always try and have that head a little bit higher positioned in the photograph, and then I kind of look for the distance from the top of the baby's head to the frame, and then possibly the feet over here, so that it is more evenly sort of evenly balanced. What I would probably recommend here with the pose is to, it can be very difficult to get those arms just right in that side pose. The baby's top arm, this one, and the head look great. What I'm seeing is this arm here underneath. So it's come up quite high, and the baby's head is kind of really putting a lot of weight on that hand, and that's what's creating this redness in here. So when you are positioning the baby, you do need to consider those things in terms of its comfort and in terms of, you know, distraction, I suppose, in that final image. Just zoom out just a little bit more. So what I would do when I am positioning the baby in this pose is, as you roll them onto their side, you want to make sure that that elbow comes down and is connected with the body. So that way you can bring that hand in underneath the chin. And as you roll over, and if you do this yourself, for all of you who are in the UK or Europe or watching from your beds, which I saw earlier, roll onto your side and feel how uncomfortable that is, and then kind of bring that elbow down into your body, and then you'll be able to rest that hand underneath that cheek. It's the same with them. You've got to bring that arm down and connect that elbow with the body, so to make it look a little more comfortable. So when I'm turning them, I'm considering that bottom arm as I turn, and it's not until I position that hand up underneath the face, the top hand, and I do that usually last, but I bring them over, get the bottom hand right, and then I tuck the little legs up, and then I work on that arm there. The skin tones in the face and the body up here are just lovely. It's just this area here that I'm looking at, because the light is coming in like this, and it's not coming in like that from an elevated position. So what I want you to do next time is just turn that posing bag a little more towards that light source and have it coming down across the baby's face. Now the reason that I can see that it's not is that the shadow is directly underneath the baby's nose there, and I can see where that light is coming through like that. So what you want is the light to come through to create a little shadow around this side of the nose. And then that's going to have a little bit more of an even spread across that face. But as you're posing babies and you're getting used to how you position them and things like that, the one thing, I said that I'm enjoying the awkwardness of this. I think it's because of that beautiful baby's face, but the arms, you do want to make them look comfortable. Every photograph that you look at, whether it's a portrait of an elderly person or a portrait of a baby or a portrait of a dog, it's going to make you feel something. And that's what photos do. They give you emotions. So you don't want people to look at a photo and go, oh, that makes me feel uncomfortable. That baby doesn't look comfortable. So you do want to consider that when you are posing the babies. I had a photo on the wall in my home studio for a long time, and my older brother walked in and he's like, oh, that baby looks cold. And it was all curled up and it was a high key black and white, and it was a naked baby like this. And I thought to myself, it wasn't cold, there was a heater on. How does he know he doesn't know what he's talking about? But then I started to consider the photos that I hang on my clients' walls, because every client leaves with a printed product. So when their friends and family walk into their homes and they see it, how do they feel about those photographs? What sort of emotions, what feelings does it give them? So there are always things that we have to consider when we're creating photographs for our customers. Okay, and yeah, just evening out those skin tones. It can be hard when you've got the weight of a baby's head on that hand, like I mentioned before, and it does get quite red to remove that red. So yeah, just reducing some of those magenta tones and then warming them up.
You've got great action for that I use all the time.
I do have great. Someone said that they're lying on their side right now. Love it, absolutely love it. Oh, hang on. So someone's just made a comment. I don't know who it is. So if you're just tuning in, I can see the comment, but it says private user because of the program that we're using on the screen here. Mandy, hi Mandy. I feel like the light is positioned in the right place with babies. The PLM, another comment just came in, bumped it, is in my way. How do I avoid that? That's all about height. It's all about the intensity of the light. If you have a large softbox, you want to be able to position it up quite high. What I see a lot of pullback photos is that the softbox and the front of it is flat, is straight. Get it elevated, lift it up a little higher, and then you can come in to get that shot. And if you are blocking some of that light, how do I explain this without a light? Also, with those modifiers, if they're straight onto the baby, so let's just say my hand is the modifier on a small scale, if they're straight on, the intensity of that light is going to come straight down onto that baby. So what you want to do is have a look at feathering the light across the baby. Is there a softbox in there? I think I took it downstairs. No, we're upstairs. I'm not in my studio. So yeah, pass me a bowl, Garrett. I hope you're not going hurry up. But here we go.
I'll stand over to the side.
Garrett's going to be our softbox holder. It's a large bowl. We're improvising, people. Okay, so if you have, let's bring it into the thing. So now let's turn it that way and I'll just move forward. Okay, so if that light's coming in here, what it's doing is the full intensity of that light is coming down across the baby. What you want to do is come up a little higher. This is where I would have my light positioned. And then I would have it somewhat turned away so that you're getting all of this spill, this beautiful soft feathered light coming across the baby. This is going to open that space up a little more for you to be able to position yourself in the right place, because as you turn that light, and it will be somewhat towards you, you're going to be able to get now into that position to shoot down. So you're looking for this beautiful feathered light coming off the edge of that softbox. You are not turning it directly straight on, because then you're not going to have anywhere to stand. You are going to block that space, but that full intensity of light is probably not the best light anyway for babies, because you want to have beautiful soft light. So yeah, I would have a look at playing and feathering that light. Now, if you don't know what I'm talking about, thank you. I explain this in Getting It Right in Camera. I purposely shot that whole tutorial with a softbox so that I could show how I turn and change the direction and the intensity of that light by moving it. So yeah, really great information. There's also a video here in the group. We did a Facebook Live. Garrett was cheeky when Michelle was taking my portrait, and we were using strobes, and it's a video here in the group. So if you go to the search bar, you can type in, I think it's Kelly Brown
new portrait or something.
New portrait, yeah.
New headshot. The one thing that you mentioned that technique before, and it's like turning the light to the camera. Like it's almost like you're turning it away, and the edge of that light is falling across the baby.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Yeah, I found that term to be.
So someone has just commented here about when I'm cropping the images. So I've obviously cropped this photo that we've got here on the screen. You consider the photo being matted and framed. Absolutely, but you know what? You're probably only going to have a couple of mil of the photo underneath the mat anyway. So we mat so much of our work, and all of my images, we do a reveal wall when we do our in-person viewing sessions, or people call them sales sessions. But they come in and they see their photographs beautifully presented in mats. So yes, you do want to leave enough space, but there's obviously here, I've cropped this in and I've left enough space. So yeah, consider that, absolutely. But you don't need a huge amount of space, not as much as what was already here. But what I am looking for is the that composition, and you know, positioning that baby within that frame a little more balanced. So yeah, I hope that's all making sense. Let me know your feedback.
Shannon Liddell Hart's actually given us a great suggestion here. We need to create a little mini diorama of a studio setup, so we can move the light and the posing bag.
Shannon, when are you coming for our next crafting day? All right, guys, let's keep going. How many we got? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 more to go.
Awesome.
Oh, look at this baby's face. Are you serious? Like, that is just the sweetest expression I've ever seen. But did you notice how I had to zoom in? I had to zoom in because that's where the shot is. The rest of the image doesn't need to be there. My God, look at this photo. So I'm looking, I always go for a 6:4 ratio. But yeah, look at this, when I do this. Then it's all about that baby. I'm just looking for the right bit of balance there. So the other thing that would have really benefited this photograph, because it's got so much going for it, is just by turning them towards that light source. The light is coming in over here and it's just hitting the back of Dad's arm. His body is creating a shadow here and preventing a lot of that light coming across to the baby's face and to Mum's face. If you just turned them on an angle towards that light source, you'd get an even fall off of light here and onto that little baby's face. But because it's coming in here, it's hitting the back of Dad's arm, it's hitting the back of his neck, and it's hitting the baby's arm as well. And it's also highlighting these areas down here which don't need to be in it. There's so much skin going on around the baby, and then we've got, you know, these black heavy clothes, which is fine, but we don't need it. And you've got to use light and the direction of light to be able to create shape in terms of your composition, in terms of highlights and shadows of what you want the viewer to see and what you don't want the viewer to see. Because when you get that light spot on, if you've got it elevated, if this is a window, obviously you've got light coming in down here, you've got light coming in down here. And the intensity looks consistent at both the top and the bottom of the frame. But where you want that light to come down is on an elevated angle, like I keep saying, and having them turned more towards that light source on a 45-degree angle. So you literally, when I get them all set up like this, I come in and I put a hand on Dad's shoulder and a hand on Mum's shoulder, and I go, I just want you to shuffle this way for me. Oh my God, absolutely perfect. That light is amazing. When you talk to them that way and you come in and you, even before you touch them, if you can sense someone's a little hesitant, you know, just, do you mind if I just turn you a little bit more towards the light? Talk to them, communicate with them, and then they'll understand why. So they're not going, why is she touching me? Why are we moving? They don't know what you're looking for as a photographer, so you need to continually communicate and explain what it is that you're doing. But yeah, you crop that photo in. And another thing when I'm posing mums and dads is I will often have the dad on the other side, because they are often, in the majority of cases, larger than the mother, so they are going to block a lot of light. So I tend to put the smaller person closest to the light source, and then the dad on the other side, and turn them on that 45-degree angle. But other than that, beautiful. The only thing I've got to criticize here is just that position of the light. If it is natural light and it's a big window and you think, oh, but I can't move it, well, do you know what? Block out the bottom half of it so that it's only coming in up here. And then you're going to be able to direct it and control it a little more. All right, and you know what? If you'd done that, you wouldn't need to crop it so much, because if the light's coming down, you're going to have shadows down here, which is going to eliminate a lot of those distraction. And if you'd turned around, you wouldn't have these highlights here, and the light would be hitting up here. So you'd be able to control it a little more, if that makes sense. But the intimacy in that face, good call. Good, yeah, I love it. And I'm just got an itchy eye. 2 seconds. Okay. All right. So we've got another backlit image here, and I can see like the brightness of that light coming in is hitting the side of the baby. So it is again more side on, and it's coming across in such a way that you can see how that light is falling off over there. So what I'd recommend is to have that light coming in from a higher position up here down across that baby, so that way you're going to have a more fall off a light onto this side. Because what we've got right here now is quite a contrasting photo. We've got some really dark shadows going on around here, so you can see the information over here in the histogram. A lot of those dark shadows don't have a lot of detail in them. And then up here we've got a lot of really sort of bright exposed information in terms of the intensity of that light. So this is where, if it's a softbox, you know, feathering that light, elevating that light a little more. And the reason I keep saying elevate that light is because our head's up here, it's not down here, and the head needs to be the closest to the light source when we're standing, and then when we're lying we need to turn and position towards that light. But the sun, when you think back to paintings in history, the light is elevated. They used natural light or candle light, but they never lit from down below and up unless they were going for that type of look. They've always lit from above, and they used the natural light that comes through windows and things like that, but it always comes from an elevated position because it's the sun, it's in the sky. So when you think about light, consider those things as well. Plus, it is a lot more flattering, you know, to light that way.
There's a new blog post just put on to newbornposing.com,
Oh, yes.
all about light.
Yesterday, go to the newbornposing.com website and go to blog posts, and there's a little article there on lighting. So yeah, fantastic. Also, with that intensity of light, just bringing in a reflector to this side of the photo just to fill some of those shadows. He's obviously got his gaze caught on something there. He's really staring off into space, but he looks like he's quite stiff here. And I did see a comment before about, you know, what do you do with stiff babies? You know, they're often stiff for a reason, so you've just got to, you know, wait for them to relax, and you know what, they might just be uncomfortable. So not every baby's comfortable in every pose, but it's just making them feel nice and relaxed and comfortable. So with this here, I would have placed a support, a little bit more of a support just under the back of the baby's head to give it a little bit more lift, and then you would have created a bit more of a round shape instead of having that stiffness through there. So that's another thing that you want to consider. And I do like how he's kind of steering off, but he's really intent on looking whatever it is. And I find that when babies are awake like that, I just come across in front of them because they like to focus on high contrasting objects, because obviously their eyesight is not the best when they're only a couple of weeks old. And then I wait for them to get the camera in their gaze, and then I'll just slowly move back into the position that I want to capture that from. And you might be able to get that shot you know, with the direct eye contact. but it is lovely, and I love the positioning of those little feet. But again, going back to that whole light area, like if you look at this photograph and we go small, you know, and then as you start to bring that photograph forward, we're looking at the brighter parts of the image, which is the bottom half, not the top half. And you always want to have that control and that direction of light to bring your eye to where you want the viewer to look. All right, talking about eye connection, and look at that face. So yeah, that contact with the eye is spot on. It's got, and he looks, I don't know if it's a boy, I'm assuming, but he looks really relaxed, really, really comfortable there. I love the placement of the baby in the crate. It's the word I'm looking for. And then when we have a little look at the composition here, you know, the baby's in the bottom two halves of the frame, and then you've got this little bit of space up the top here in the background, which is beautiful because it adds to the scene. It's positioned really well. You could have come in just a little more on the bottom there. Obviously not so much, not cutting into the edge of the wrap there. But just to kind of balance it off a little more, to not have that white area at the bottom of the screen there. It's not really necessary. So for example, just bringing it down a little more into that frame and eliminating that white space, because it is quite bright compared to everything else with where the light is hitting it. Because I can see here with the light coming in, obviously the reflection in the eyes there, it's coming from an elevated place. So that light is coming down and it's hitting the floor as well as the baby. So you do need to be careful of that. Alrighty. I love the color palette, really great job. And that background, it's just beautiful. But that's all I've got to say really about that. I love watching Garrett's face in the background here. He smiles and he nods and he turns his head and he's very into it.
No, I always, like, I used to sit there and just watch you edit all the time, and it was always fascinating to see the different things that you would look at within an image to either enhance it or, you know, remove the distraction and all that sort of thing. And that was just in the post-production part. And then when you did Get It Right in Camera, it was kind of how you moved your body to kind of
get
do
it right.
all of that,
And
all of those things.
with you saying that, I'm reading a comment here saying, I love the way you've cropped. I agree that looks amazing, but I'm afraid of cropping the images so much. I feel like that I lose a lot. Do you know what? Don't shoot with intention. Crop in camera. Get that composition right in camera. Move your body. I think a lot of people forget to move their body, and as I mentioned earlier on in this critique, you know, we've got so much to consider when we're taking these photos. So you want to make sure that you are getting that crop right in camera. But I'm just showing you here in post-production how the type of crop and the way that I would look for composition when I am taking that photo. So yes, when you do crop a photo in Photoshop or in Lightroom or whatever program you're using, you are going to remove a lot of information from your file. So that is why you want to get it right in camera. All right. Oh my goodness, look at this, babies. Too many cute ones today. I'm loving the setup here. Look at all of this. Okay, few things that would make, like I've opened this and gone, oh my goodness. But you know what I want to do when I open this photo is go, wow. So again, it's the light. It's very contrasty. And what I want to see is a little more softness in terms of that light, but bringing it further around to that baby's face, because I feel like we're lighting this and it's a beautiful photo of those flowers, but we forgot to light the baby. We've got some really kind of dark red tones as well here. Obviously when the arm comes forward like that and it dangles, a lot of that blood will kind of flow through that arm, and the circulation will reduce, and it's going to make that arm a little more purple in terms of those red tones. So you've got to be careful of that. You can reduce that obviously in post-production, but you do have to be more aware of that. And when you've got the baby's face coming so far away from that light. You just need to turn them a little more. And I can see what you've done in terms of the background, because we've got a line here and we've got a line here, and then you've got these lines of the crate, so you've tried to line it all up square. If you're using artificial light, move it around and have it sort of coming in from this direction but from an elevated point of view. Or if you're using natural light, you know what, you're just going to have to turn that baby towards that light source a little more, because you know, you've really kind of missed it, I suppose, in terms of getting that perfect exposure. But also consider this: if this is a natural light photograph, have the baby set up on this side and have the flowers over here, because the baby is the main part, and that's what you want to light first. Have them closest to that light source, and then you could have turned them a little more in that bucket towards the light so that it was on a more of a 45-degree angle. So I would revisit this setup, because I think it's absolutely beautiful in terms of the color palette and the styling. You know, you've gone to all of that trouble. Put the baby over here in the bucket, and put your flowers on that side, and then turn the bucket towards the light source with the baby in it, so you get that beautiful fall off of light. And then the detail that's in these flowers over here are just adding to the image in terms of being complementary, but they're not distracting. Because if you'd turned the baby with the flowers over here now, you would have turned the baby into those flowers, so that wouldn't have worked. But swapping them out, absolutely. And then you wouldn't have had so much dark shadows around the baby's face here and problems with those red skin tones. The exposure is somewhat off. If you have a look at your histogram, you got a lot of information down that other end of the file. Yes, it is a dark, moody image, but if you see where the information is hitting the edge of that histogram, that's a loss in detail. So let's go up and bring up our curves. So you can see now there's zero detail in all of those blacks. If you print that, they're just going to be black blobs on the page with no detail in them. So this is where you really do need to be considering the information in that file when you're taking it and having a look at that histogram. So what I would have done there, if you've got that light perfect on the face in terms of the highlights, I would then bring in a reflector. So when you bring in that reflector, depending on how close you bring that reflector in, you've got to watch that histogram. So I would bring it in a little bit, take a shot, look at the histogram. If it's not right, bring it in a little closer. Don't change your exposure, just bring that reflector in, and you'll notice that what that does is it will bring those blacks, those shadows back into that histogram, and you won't have that loss of detail. But also when you're editing, if you're using presets, actions, things like that, a lot of them will have contrast layers in them, and they will bring, and that contrast will bring that exposure down too. So when you are using things like that, make sure that you are applying all of those layers and adjusting them to taste for your image. That's just another little tip. You might not be using actions, that's fine, but I know that a lot of people do, and they don't keep an eye on how they can be adjusted and tweaked to specifically for your image. Okay, next. Alrighty. Okay, that baby is posed beautifully. I can see you know, the detail and the effort that's gone into the positioning of the little one.
Just one moment.
It's not coming up.
No.
What we do wrong?
Don't know what I've done. What am I
Bear with us,
do?
guys.
Yeah.
We still got lots of people on watching.
We do.
Fantastic.
We do.
All right, we got any more questions while Garrett's doing that? I'll try and read them behind him.
I'll move out of the way.
Okay.
Okay. Here we go. I'm just going to add another.
I'm off to bed here in the UK.
Let's see if I can bring that back up.
Okay,
And
give us
I'll
2
just
seconds.
do a little reboot
If you guys
on
got any
the
questions, pop them into the
screen.
comments. We've only got 2 images left to go through.
I know, and it stopped working. I'm just going to jump onto the computer for a little second.
All right, let me do it this way.
Sure.
I can't see any questions coming through. Oh, here we go. No. Hi from New York. Hi.
Okay, you can use my phone even.
Here we go.
There we go, and you can scroll back
I'll
through
have a
some
look
of
at
those.
some of these
yeah.
questions. All right. Oh, Sky. So Sky has just said that it was your second newborn. Well done. You know what? The level of work that we're seeing come through the group for people who are only just starting out, and it is so amazing. It is really, really incredible to see just the level of work that's being created out there. And obviously that's because people are spending the time to practice, and they're really working hard at getting getting it all right before they take that shot. And like I said, it can be so hard to remember absolutely everything. Okay, Kathy has asked, when you feather the light, how do you judge how far to angle the light away from your subject? So, do you know what? This is something, because every light is different, and so the intensity of the light, and depending on where you've positioned that light, so how close it is to your subject, that's all going to factor into how much you need to feather that light as well. But what you need to look for, and it is harder to see with strobes because you're going based off the modeling light, or the lamp as a lot of people call it, but you just have to turn it and watch the shadows across the face. So as you position, and do this with a small child, your child, sit them down and have them positioned where you would position your subject, but practice. And even getting a plastic fake baby, please don't ask me when mine's coming. I would love it to be tomorrow, but it's not. But just watching the shadows as they move and change with you moving that light. But also it depends too on how you're capturing that light as well. There are a lot of different factors when it comes to lighting. Is we got it up working?
We're good.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
So yeah, it just all comes down to practice, and also, the strength and the power of your light as well. Like some people are working with 400 watt lights. I'm working with 800 watt lights. So and it is going to also change for constant light as well. So they're both very different light sources. Constant light, you can see it as you move it and as you feather it. What you're seeing the light do is how you're going to capture it essentially. Whereas with strobe, you're getting those big bursts of light come through. So sometimes it's just a matter of knowing where you like your light. Like I walk into my studio, I know where I'm going to position my posing bag in terms of distance from my window because I know my light source. So this is where, regardless of whatever the light that it is that you're shooting with, you've got to know it. You've got to know how you're going to capture it, and that only comes with practice. I was going to do a Facebook Live actually when I get back from China on my 3 Ps of practice, persistence, and patience. So, so important.
I think I'll put that one in the calendar.
Yeah, but there is no set recipe. Do you know what I mean? Because we don't know your space, and every time somebody says, "Oh, what's the best light?" or "What do I do here?" You know what? Go out into a lighting supply store. Have a look at the enormous amount of different lights that are available. Consider your budget, consider your space and what it is that you're shooting, and what light is going to be best for you. Because what works for me is not going to work for you, because my studio is different and the space is different, my budget's different, all of those things. Plus we can't get in Australia a lot of the strobes that they use in the United States. Like you just can't buy them here unless you're shipping it in from overseas. So there is so much to consider about lighting. But you do have to have a very, very good understanding of lighting fundamentals to go and buy the right light for you too. So what works for someone's not always going to work for you because there's so many different factors. All right, let's move on. Okay. All right. Like I said before, but you couldn't see the image, the baby's posed beautifully. I love the way that their little face is kind of coming up towards the camera there. One thing that I'm kind of looking at, or we'll start with the composition, is just how close the baby is to the bottom part of the image there. So, and we've got quite a bit of space up in the background there. So maybe just leaving a little bit more room down the bottom of the frame here for the baby to breathe. But other than that, I would probably give it about that much space. And in terms of position in the frame, whenever I'm working with the side pose, what I kind of looking for here is a little bit of equal distance from the head to the edge of the frame, and then the elbow to the edge of the frame, and then positioning that baby in those bottom 2/3 and having that negative space up into that back corner. So that's kind of where I would go in camera in terms of looking for that right camera angle and that composition. What else I'm looking at here is the wrap, and it is all the way out behind the baby. Whenever I position the fabric behind this particular pose, what I try to look for is for it to flow off into that negative space, so that you're filling that area, because we've got a lot of detail up here and nothing over in this side. So you kind of can fill it. And then by doing that, by putting all of this over here, you're moving it further away from the camera. So when you're shooting at, say, 2.8, that beautiful depth of field, it's going to make it look a lot softer, and then it's going to be, a lot more out of focus. And those contrasting highlights and shadows will become softer as well as it moves off into the distance, if that makes sense, how I've explained it. Because as the light's coming in here, and I can see it's hitting the background there, and it's hitting here. When you add these supports in here underneath the baby, again, they create a mountain, so they block some of the light that's coming in towards the baby. So you need to consider that. So you might just have to push those supports further in underneath the baby's head to bring it up a little, and then turn the baby as well towards that light source. If you're using natural light and you've got the light over here, but you only want the light to come here, grab a V-flag, grab some polystyrene, paint it black, block out the light that's coming up here, and control the amount of light coming through so it's only coming onto the subject. That's going to make that baby's face stand out more, and not light the background, bringing contrasting detail into the areas that you don't want it. So another thing that I'm kind of looking at here is the baby's skin is quite sort of soft in tone, and it's looking quite flat. The feet are looking a little grey, and the skin tones over here. When you reduce the reds in skin tones, you don't want to remove all of them. You want to have some warmth in there. You want to have some detail. So make sure that you're not reducing all of those reds and making that baby look quite sort of flat and dull. So I can see the light hitting the top of the nose, and again, and here as well, and that's because of this area blocking some of that light that's flowing through onto the baby. But again, you wouldn't have that problem if that light was a little more elevated and around towards the front of the baby, coming in on that face. So yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say about that. Great job with the background being really nice and smooth, and taking the time to get that right in camera. They're squishy. Oh, all right. I really love the simplicity in terms of not a lot of it's not a very busy photo. So you've got this beautiful soft grey background, and then you've got the grey wrap. So the styling is really, really lovely. And this baby's just all squished. Look at it. What I'm kind of looking at is I think it's the posing. So and it's not so much the posing. You've got great connection between the elbow and the knee, and the hand is underneath that cheek, and you've got that chin coming down towards that shoulder. So it's not the posing, it's the positioning of your supports underneath the baby. So I think if we just have a little look at that, that might put that baby into a much more balanced position, because at the moment we're kind of going down onto a bit of a slope like this. And what we want is, when we do the bum up pose, is to kind of have that baby on a nice, not that big, but curve is what I'm looking for. And I always try to keep, the positioning of the sort of like the hand and the head even with the feet. So I would bring those supports in here to lift up the bottom half of the baby, and then that's what's going to create, more of these squishy rolls here. So if you bring in some more supports here underneath that baby and just lift a little more, you're going to balance out the baby there, because with a crop this tight and where the baby is kind of positioned, it's very close to the edge of the frame, like here and here and over here. So you want to come back and allow a little bit more room in terms of just giving it more space to breathe. We've got quite a bit of support here, and what that's done is it's created a flat surface, when with the bum up pose you want to create that beautiful curve. So just positioning those supports a little more and having them more so here and underneath the top of the chest area, and not so much down here. So it's getting used to where to place those supports. So with the bum up pose, I try to have my supports, you know, and my towels underneath that part and underneath that part. So that way you get that beautiful curve in the middle and having those nice and balanced. If you've got a well in your posing bag, that's a great place to start, and then you don't need to lift the baby so much. You're only then placing supports underneath the head just to bring that face and cheek up a little more too. What I'm also looking at here is just the size of the baby's head here. So that is a really big space compared to that area there. So coming around a little more, making sure that that face is a bit more square on. But this is where I would place my hand, my right hand, underneath the back of the baby's head here, and just lift and bring that chin up a little bit more towards that light. So yeah, but in terms of the exposure, you know, the skin tones are lovely. I would probably just even them out a little bit more down here, where the toes are a little bit grayer than the rest of those beautiful warm skin tones. And what I would do is just turn that bag a little more so that light hits the face, because as that light is coming in, the top of the baby's head is creating shadows here, 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 and here, and it's lighting here. So you want to bring that bag around so the baby is a little bit more of an angle towards that light source, and then that way it's going to even out the light across the baby so that the thigh is not the brightest part of the image. Because at the moment, as you've brought that bottom half of the baby around, you've brought it around to the light, but the head is away from the light. So that's where you've got to turn that posing bag so that the baby's a little more evenly lit. In terms of focal length, obviously I don't know what lens you used, but if you're using, with all of these particular poses, anything that is at the edge of the frame is going to have some form of distortion. Babies' heads are obviously quite large, so what you want to do is use a longer focal length. By using a longer focal length and moving back further from your subject, you're then going to create a beautiful depth of field up here. The closer you are to that subject with a wider angle, you're going to create distortion, and it's not going to be as flattering, which is what's happening over here with the head. So I always move back longer. I've got a 24-70 lens, and I primarily use it at a 70mm focal length, purely because I want to get that beautiful depth of field, and I want very little distortion. When it comes to lenses, those longer focal lengths are best suited for portraits, and these are portraits that we're taking. When people say, oh, the 35mm is great, do you know what? It was not designed and it was not made for portrait photography. Yes, there are beautiful 35mm lenses out there, but unless your subject is smack bang in the middle of that frame and your camera angles and your perspective are right, and you know how that lens is going to capture that information, you're going to create some distortion in your photographs. So really consider those focal lengths because they are so important. It was one of the first things I learnt when I studied photography many years ago. So there is a free lens video if you're interested in that on YouTube. Just go there, Kelly Brown, check it out. What else am I looking at here? I think that's pretty much it. Yeah, just give that a little bit more space, move it around, and adjust those supports, and yeah, you'll see a huge difference. Alrighty, that is it, our 20 images. Thank you for joining me for this. My croakiness is gone now.
I think it might have been the air conditioner when I turned it on earlier. So
yeah, it was a little cold in here.
I turned that off and
and it was blowing straight on me, but no more excuses. Alrighty, so I hope you guys enjoyed that. Obviously it's a lot of information to take in, and if you submitted some photos, thank you, because I really appreciate you trusting me to critique your images. I really appreciate you sharing them with everybody else in the group so that they can also learn from them. And I know it can be hard for those who missed out on submitting a photo, but we do put in the banner of the group, we do put the dates for the image critiques up there. They're always on a Friday every month, and we usually try to do it in the middle of the month. But we put those dates up there, and when they're on a Friday, it means that 2 days before we'll do the image call. But it just means that you've got to be more active in the group and turn on those notifications so you can see when I'm posting the links for people to upload. And I do change it so that there are different times for people all over the world, because here in Australia it's very hard to be on the right time zone for every other country out there. So we alternate a little bit. Sometimes we do the critiques at 8 a.m. in the morning, sometimes we do them at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, just so that we make it fair. But they are recorded, they are left here in the group, so you can come back and watch them at any time. And this is something that I love being able to share, and I hope that you are getting something from it. If you don't think that what I shared is the right information for you, that's fine. Everybody has their own opinions and information, and I hope that everything I've been sharing, which is not only from my own past experiences as a photographer over the last 15 years, but I have studied photography. I kind of do know what I'm talking about to a degree. I'm not as technical as some people, but we're always learning, we're always improving, and we're always growing, and that's what it's all about. It's about sharing knowledge and information. And right here in the group, I love this community and how well you all do it and support each other and encourage each other. Over the last couple of weeks, we've removed quite a few things. Someone posted a photo. It was somewhat very innocent and cute, and it offended someone else, and then all of a sudden the photographer, we removed the photo because it got reported quite a few times, and then I got contacted by a reporter in a newspaper, and they wanted to know why the photo was removed and all of this kind of stuff. And you know what, that's very, very rare that things like that happen here in that group, but it does happen. And it's not great, but at the end of the day, what we see is just a very large community of support for each other and encouragement, and that's what I want it to continue to be, because it's important to have that when you are working in such a solitary job as a photographer. We're often quite lonely, and don't feel like that we have the tribe that we need. I'm reading some of these questions.
Marin says, love learning from you, Kelly. I'd love to one day to be able to enter photography awards to learn more from others and judges, but have just started out, so wouldn't know where to start. ... The Rise Awards are coming up.
They are. So we haven't actually released dates just yet, but I can tell you that the live judging and the awards is going to be on the 26th of July.
Yeah, that sounds...
I don't have the calendar in front of me.
Towards the end of July.
So they are coming very, very soon. We are having a brand new website built for the Rise Awards, and it is specifically for us. So it's custom made so that the user journey will be a very, very easy one. All of the information will be on that website as well when it's finally launched. And if you want any more information about the Rise Awards, go to the Rise International Photography Awards Facebook page, and there's lots of photos from last year's finalists and winners and information as well. So that's
and the awards are for everyone.
Absolutely.
It's not pro level, it's for everyone to learn and get the feedback that they need. So
we actually have an award, and it is for the Rising Photographer of the Year, and it's for someone who's been in business less than 2 years. And I think the winner last year was only like a photographer for 7 months.
Yeah.
So it is a fantastic place to get feedback, and every photograph receives feedback. It is a wonderful thing to do. So not all photography competitions offer feedback, but that's what we're about. We're about learning, growing, and pushing yourself, because it's nice to be rewarded for all of your hard work, and it's something I truly believe in. And for me personally, I've been entering awards for a long time, and I can tell you that whilst it is nice to win awards, the growth that you get just from the whole experience is phenomenal. How much you push yourself, and then when you start to kind of shoot for yourself and shoot for those awards as well from a creative level, you you break new grounds, and I love doing that. And sometimes your ideas work, and sometimes they don't. So yeah, don't be afraid to put yourself out there. Don't be afraid to push and try things, because you know what? I posted a little graphic in the group the other day, and it was 5 things you need to quit right now. I want you to find that because it's really important. But the first one was trying to please everyone. You know, start looking at doing things for yourself, because it's your photography, your business, and there is a reason why you picked up that camera, and there's a reason why you love it. So stop worrying about what everyone else out there thinks, and focus on you and where you want to go and your goals, and you're going to be just fine. So I'm going to go because it's Friday. Garrett and I are off to China on Sunday. So I won't be around in the group for about a week, purely because Facebook is not used in China. There may be times when we're able to jump on, but we won't. We'll be gone for a week.
Yeah.
And then we'll be back.
So yeah, really exciting.
I'll be back for
really,
Easter.
Really exciting. But Michelle and Linda will be here.
Yep.
So they'll be interacting in the group on your behalf and
Absolutely.
answering questions and that sort of stuff.
Yeah. And again, if your question's not for the group, send it through to support@newbornposing.com, and we'll get back to you as soon as we possibly can. But yeah, our Easter sale starts today on Newborn Posing.
Yeah.
Which is fantastic, and I've been dying to share the photos that I took for Easter, so I'll be sharing that soon because it's so cute. I'm going to go now. Bye. Have a great weekend, everyone. See you later. Bye.